Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how neural networks can try to understand neural networks, how our brains and our collections of brains are trying to tackle one of the biggest mysteries, which is how the brain functions and how we can treat disorders of the brain. And one of the big issues that we've been trying to confront is how to deal with the incredible complexity of brain circuits. At the microscale, our brains are made out of hundreds of billions of cells, all wired up in immense complexity. And one of the big issues is how do you deal with the immense computational power that's happening within, at the microscale, within those brain circuits. And there's a practical reason that we're concerned about this as well, which is the immense cost to human suffering and also the economic cost of brain disorders. Not only is this a philosophically important system to tackle, how does the brain form a thought, how does it form an emotion, but if you look at the list of disorders on this slide, the vast majority of them are not treatable and none of them are curable. And so one of the big questions is, how can you tackle these very, very complex problems? So one of the big issues that we've realized is that we need better tools in order to tackle these problems. We need to be able to understand how the elements within the brain work together to implement the computations that we regard as our thoughts and feelings and so on. And what that really means is that we need to develop better ways of measuring and controlling brain circuits. And control is important because that's how you can fix disorders. You can turn off a seizure, or you can repair the blind or the deaf. And so in past sponsor meetings, I've talked about our actual technologies and what they can be used for. But today I want to focus upon the actual process of innovation. How do we go about actually making these inventions? And I'll introduce the idea with an invention that we developed a while back and now is in widespread use, and then talk about how two new projects that you can come see during the open houses are taking place right now through these networks of networks. So the problem, of course, with a good tool to analyze or engineer the brain is that the brain is very messy and complicated. So the precision, the safety, the fidelity, the causality, the power of these tools is very demanding. Things that work in a dish in a medical center or in a hospital or in a laboratory might not work if you want to actually build prosthetics to enhance the brain for somebody who has Alzheimer's disease, for example, or if you want to understand how a network computes. So because of the difficulty, it means that you have to be lucky. You have to be able to design inventions, but those inventions have to work in the complex messiness of the brain. And so how do you engineer luck is kind of one of our major questions that we try to address. So one of the inventions that we and our colleagues have developed over the last couple of years illustrates how this process kind of came together. And in this case, we're trying to take advantage of the fact that neurons in the brain, the cells that make up the brain, are electrical devices. So if we can find organisms that convert light into electricity, and then take those molecules that convert light into electricity, such as these molecules in the eye of this little unicellular algae that swims around in a pond, and we take that molecule and put it into neurons, then light can be converted into electricity. Electricity is the currency of the brain, and we can then control brain computations by putting this molecule, you can see here light shining on it and transporting charge, sort of like a solar cell, except that we can put it into neurons. If we can transplant that into cells, then we can try to control just those cells and fix them. You can see on the Research Updates websites pictures of how we're trying to address addiction and blindness and other issues using these tools. Now, it turns out that we were able to talk to experts on algae, and also to take advantage of the fact that people are sequencing the genomes of these organisms, so you can find out how these critters encode for the molecules that make up their composition. And you can actually take this piece of DNA that encodes for this molecule, this solar cell, transplant it into certain neurons deep in the brain, and now those neurons will actually manufacture these solar panels and install them, and then this neuron will then be controllable just by pulses of light. And so this has been a useful invention. But if you think about it, what I've told over the last couple of minutes is a story about how, by bringing together people who are experts on algae and genomics and optics and neuroscience, we were able to develop a tool that allows us to then exert great control, both for scientific purposes, but also for diagnostic, drug development, and as you will see on the website, different aspects of prosthetics and so on and so forth. And already, just over the last 5 years since our group started at MIT, we've distributed these tools to over 500 research groups in academia and in industry, including with Media Lab sponsors. So how do we put this together? We try to decompose this problem into some sub-problems that we have to solve. One is to find people who have solutions. In this case, there are people who are experts on plants and who are experts on genomics. And at the time that we began this project, I didn't know a whole lot about either, except that what I could find on the internet. We also had to find problem people, the people who know about the issues that need to be confronted, clinically speaking, and also from the standpoint of understanding the brain. And then, to borrow a term that's used in the context, for example, for the TED conference, you need curators. Curators are the people and the ideas who can match optimally the solution people and the problem people, but do it in a proactive way to try and figure out exactly what aspect of the solution will solve exactly what aspect of the problem. And this is a very active process. It's not something that can be done passively because there are many solutions and many problems. And there's an art form to try and figure out how to put them together. So in the years since, we've tried to generalize this philosophy of luck optimization. How do you optimize the coincidence of problems and solutions in order to find their overlap? And of course, this is a very high-dimensional space. If you think about the kinds of solutions out there, new inventions and new basic science results are coming out all the time. A new material, a new chemical, new abilities to interrogate biology and to understand and to try to control biology are coming along all the time. And of course, the problems are, as we began the talk with, incredibly complex. There are intractable disorders and just deep questions about what it means to be human that are difficult to confront if you don't have this ability to really pick the optimal tool for the optimal problem that you're trying to confront. And so this curation effort is something that we've tried to implement as a meta-discipline, as it were, a way of trying to mine from the wealth of all technology insights that allow us then to confront intractable disorders or to try and find new tools that empower biologists and clinicians to understand neuropathology and to fix the problems of the brain. So I want to talk about a couple principles that have emerged. One is that we've found that the curators have to have a network that's very cohesive and yet distributed. You don't want to limit yourself to any institution or any discipline necessarily, because you don't know where the next revolutions are going to come from. You always have to be looking, and you have to be hunting all the time. And that reconfigurability and flexibility is intrinsically important. I'll tell you two short stories in a second about how technologies from all sorts of arenas, such as robotics or silicon microfabrication, have started to make their way into new areas of trying to confront brain analysis and the treatment of brain disorders. And when we started this whole aspect of neuroengineering several years ago, we didn't anticipate either of these things. And scalability is a big thing as well. You want to avoid the limits of being a fixed set of people by being everybody. And because any fixed set of people will have certain limits, they can be large limits. People can have great imagination and knowledge. But if you can find ways to marshal the forces of humanity, as it were, to try and solve problems, then you can go beyond if you can dynamically curate and build these teams. And so just over the last 5 years, our group has started an enormous number of such collaborations, meeting solutions people from all over the world, trying to also meet problems people who are expert in different clinical issues, ranging from epilepsy to blindness. This is just a partial list of the institutions with which our group here at the Media Lab is collaborating in this effort, in a quest to try and find new technologies that we can then bring to bear upon problems of the brain, but also to try and find problems that we can actually treat and solve. One of the big issues, of course, is how to motivate people to collaborate. And I think what you want to do is to find solution people who really care about solving an impactful problem, who want to broaden their influence beyond the field from which they began. And to find problem people who are craving new tools. They want to try things out. And there will be failure in trying out new tools. So there has to be this expectation that a constructive failure is OK. And we try to build that in. It's as much an emotional motivation as it is an intellectual one. It has to also be a non-zero-sum game culture. You have to really get people to believe that you're going to solve huge problems, things that transcend kind of the problems that they're considering right now. And for the brain, I think that we'd all agree that we're at an early stage of our understanding of the brain, that the mysteries of how thought and emotion occur and how to treat these disorders is definitely something which begins us at a starting point where it's not a zero-sum game. So that's kind of how we're trying to think about this problem. We also have to think about scale. And one of the things that started over the last couple of years is that people are now helping us curate this network. We've had several people leave our group and start companies who have gone off to become faculty in their own right. And by expanding this network of bringing in new people and either the problem domain or the solution domain, we can try to combinatorially optimize the matching of these kinds of things and to design ways to build systems of tools that allow us to solve problems in a way that allows us to avoid the trap of getting stuck in sort of a local minimum on an energy landscape. We have to kind of organically grow this system in order to confront it. And one of the big insights that's emerged is that if you are curating carefully, sometimes the best thing to do is actually to do nothing. You have the luxury of trying to do an optimal match, and sometimes waiting for the right opportunity is better than struggling too much along an avenue that is, in the end, fruitless or tricky. And finally, to constantly curate means to constantly synthesize ideas. We're always trying to find new things to look at, new technologies and approaches. So I want to talk about two short examples. One is we've been working on new kinds of brain prosthetics that might be useful for helping paralyzed people or helping analyze brain dynamics in neurosurgical patients, such as people undergoing epilepsy neurosurgery. And what you can see here is actually a device that can span many cubic millimeters of brain tissue, but it's micron precise, that we can record electroactivity at many points in the brain. And if you come by our area, you can actually see these prototypes. This started out with the RED cluster of groups, and it started to expand as mathematicians from Boston University and neuroscientists from other places and companies and people from Georgia Tech who are experts in mechanical engineering and so on started to bring in solutions. But also, we started to reach out to problem experts about what we could apply these to. Could we apply it to the problem of neurosurgery? Could we apply it to the problem of epilepsy? And this network continues to grow, augmenting not only the power of any given idea, because if you have an idea and there's 10 people who could apply it, that minimizes your risk in some ways. So this might look like high-risk research, but it's actually not that bad because of the combinatorial explosion of possibility that emerges. And so these sort of brain coprocessor architectures that we're developing, which have an array of recording devices that can be used to help patients or also to analyze the brain to find, for example, better drug targets in the brain or to screen drugs against side effects, we're very excited about because of its integrated aspect. It brings together all of these parts, and it's appropriate for solving these kinds of problems. Another example that really nobody saw coming in some ways is we started to work on robots that can interface to the brain. So the brain, of course, moves around. If you turn your head, your brain just moves several millimeters and it kind of jiggled. How do you actually adapt and build prosthetics that intelligently compensate for the everyday experiences and lives of humans? And also maybe to advanced diagnostics. Can you take a small biopsy of tissue and then hunt down individual cells deep in that tissue and analyze them all one by one in an automated fashion? For tumor analysis, for all sorts of other problems, this could be of great importance. And so once again, this network, this is a younger project, so the network is a little bit smaller so far. But once again, working with mechanical engineers at Georgia Tech, working with people across multiple other institutions, we were able to try to synthesize different disciplines that ordinarily had nothing to do with each other in order to try and solve a problem that could have broad correlates across the space of different arenas, including cancer diagnostics and biopsies and drug screening and neurosurgical augmentation as well. So this luck optimization process works. We can, by bringing together people who have bits of solutions, build systems that allow us to confront problems. And then by looking at the problems, we can try to experiment with how to broaden the impact of such inventions. And as a result, we have many open meetings in our group. We have visitors all the time, every week, coming by to participate and learn, including people from sponsor companies as well. And interesting, of course, as people start to use these tools to solve problems, the network expands. We have now almost in-network experts who can help us figure out, hey, you know what, I really wish I had a solution for this problem because people with Parkinson's have X, Y, and Z, and we can then go after that next. As the curators expand their reach as well, they can actively connect and synthesize. And one thing we're trying to work on now is how to teach the art of curation. So far, it's been sort of a self-selecting process where people will practice it and you'll become good at it. But now the question becomes, how do you find people who speak all these languages, who can actually delve into these different areas and understand what's important and what's impactful in order to optimally connect people in a way to facilitate innovation and to do it dynamically? And so that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to really confront this issue of, in the brain where there's 100,000 cells in a cubic millimeter of tissue, how do you analyze it? How do you engineer it? And how do you fix these eternal problems that have been plaguing humanity for a long time? So thanks.